and welcome to our second congressional debate. I'm Kelly O'Mara, News Director here at WAGM and co-moderator for tonight. And I'm joined by Jason Parent of the Aroostook Partnership and my co-moderator for this evening.
Thank you, Kelly. We are also joined by a panel of journalists from our other two partners in this evening's debate. We have Katie Zerilli from WAGM TV, Paul Merrill from WMTW, and Emily Tadlock from WABI. They will be asking the candidates the questions this evening.
The format for tonight's debate will be asking a question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond. After each has had their minute to respond, each candidate will be allowed a 45-second rebuttal. We will then move on to the next question.
We will not be doing opening statements, but instead each candidate will have a 1 minute closing statement. So without further ado, we would like to introduce the candidates for the 2nd Congressional District race. And they are, as they are appearing on your screen now from left to right, our independent candidate Will Hoare, Democratic candidate Representative Jared Golden, independent candidate Tiffany Bond, and Republican candidate incumbent Congressman Bruce Poliquin.
So we are now going to thank you guys for being here. And we're now going to jump right into our first question, which will be asked by WAGM's Katie Zerilli. So she's going to come right over here.
All right, good evening. Maine's rural rim counties, such as Aroostook, are struggling more economically than more populated areas. What specific measures would you advocate or legislation would you introduce to stimulate the economy of much of Maine's 2nd Congressional District?
And the first person to respond to that question for a minute will be independent Will Hoare.
Thank you so much. Driving up here, you can see kind of the devastation that the opioid epidemic, but also just lack of jobs have. The first measure we have to do is do a massive infrastructure bill. Infrastructure is going to be the way to quickly get people hired here, but also get people here physically. After that, broadband. Without having connectivity, we can't provide jobs. Entrepreneurs aren't able to fully develop their potential nationwide and globally. And then those are the two measures that I would focus on most.
Jared Golden, your minute on this question.
Thank you very much. You know, in many ways, I want to agree with Will that the number one thing I think Congress should be working on, it's something that they should have worked on in the previous 2 years, working with the President of the United States, would be to go big on infrastructure. We know that we need to do that in these rural rim counties in particular. Our roads and our bridges are crumbling. We need more competitive freight rail. We got to connect our ports to the interior of the United States and up into Canada. I would throw into that bucket of infrastructure things like broadband, which is going to help small businesses be competitive in the 21st century, and out selling our, promoting our markets, promoting our products, globally in this 21st century. Also, we need to create jobs, getting more competitive with energy, doing things like solar and wind, creating jobs through that, driving down costs as well along with that. And I also think Congress has a role in investing in research and development, commercialization of new products like forest products industry. What are the things that we're going to make in the 21st century? We can make those investments through the University of Maine.
Thank you. Tiffany Bond, your minute on this question.
I think we all agree that we definitely need infrastructure, whether it's roads or broadband, although I will say the drive up was delightful. So please don't wait to book a vacation. Come up and join us. It's beautiful here. There's great little cafes, there's wonderful little retail shops, and they would all love your business. What we also should be working on in Congress, because we are working with federal issues, is working on making marijuana and hemp available for fiber production, for medical research, for agricultural tourism, for the communities that wish to engage in that. I think those are going to be the two things that are really achievable within the first couple of years. I think any more than that, you're perhaps slightly ambitious. So I would focus on infrastructure, particularly broadband, as well as marijuana and hemp being available for research, development, fiber.
And lastly on this question, Bruce Poliquin.
Yes. Government can make it easy for businesses to succeed and grow and hire more people and pay them more, or government can make it more difficult. I'm the only person on this stage who has 35 years of job creation experience. This is not my career. My career was running small businesses, and creating jobs. Now, I worked very hard in Washington to make sure we put the building blocks in place for a growing economy, and it's working. Taxes are lower. There's less red tape. our trade deals are fair. When that happens, our middle-class families and our small businesses make more money. When they have more money, they can spend it on what they want, and our small businesses can invest. Let me give you an example. We have one of our great paper mills over in Rumford. They were just acquired by a company that's investing $111 million. That means they're going to grow that business, create more products, and hire more people. They just bought the Old Town Mill, and they're going to restart the Old Town Mill after being shut down for 3 years, again because of lower taxes, less red tape, more investment, more jobs.
We now will give each candidate additional 45 seconds for rebuttal or to add to this question, and we'll go back to Will Hoare.
Thank you, because my mind kind of blanked when I got the first question. I think it's also important to focus on education. Right now, we are limited in what our Mainers can do, and if people age out, a lot of the labor that's Maine focused is physical labor, and there's a certain point at which people can't work. Trump keeps extolling the economy, but up here you can see that the economy is not doing as well as people on Wall Street and Washington say. We need to offer programs to help educate people who want to change programs, change careers, and band with other rural American districts and counties to bring respect and money back to rural America.
Thank you. Jared Golden.
Thank you. You know, I just wanted to take the time to point out that I think you know, Bruce has his jobs experience, and I think everyone else up here has job creating experience as well. Now, my own comes from being a part of a small family business that's working on Main Street. I've seen the struggles of running a small business up close and personal all my life. I've seen the challenges and the ways that small businesses adapt and overcome with them. Something that small businesses in Maine, particularly in these rural counties, can't do is make those investments in infrastructure for themselves, clearly. So that, again, is why Congress needs to step in, go big on infrastructure. We got to be able to pay for that, which is why I'm concerned about the tax plan that came out of Congress in December, because it's running up our debt, making it hard to make those investments in infrastructure, which, by the way, will help the mill in Rumford. We got to be more competitive with our freight and have some of the best infrastructure in the country. We're lagging far behind.
Thank you, Jared Golden. Tiffany Bond.
So, like you've heard echoed here, my business is a small business. I run a small business just like you do. And it's hard. Right now, there isn't the supports for the small businesses. You'll hear a lot that our economy is getting better, and it's not in rural Maine. So we really need to be empowering small businesses to do that. I'd like to see all of our mills running at full capacity. Perhaps the one in Madison that's actually closed could reopen if we were working on hemp fibers and having that ability for that to come in and be a product that we work on. I also want to make sure that everything that we are doing enables small businesses to really export what's beautiful about Maine, and we have so much of that.
And the last word on this one will be Bruce Pollard.
Thank you. Our unemployment rate in the state of Maine is 2.7%. This is the lowest unemployment rate we've had in decades. We have more jobs than we have people filling those jobs. There's nobody else on this stage who has the experience I do in creating jobs. Nobody. Now, Jared mentioned his dealing with small business. I guess he works for his mom and dad's company, and that's all fine. But I'll tell you, it doesn't make any sense for someone like Jared Golden to vote 100% of the time against Maine small businesses. Now, this is not my scorecard. It's the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, 100% of the time against our small businesses. That doesn't make any sense. The economy's doing well, keep it going. I'm the only one who has the experience to do that, and I've done it.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next question. We're joined now by WMTW's Paul Merrill, and he has the question.
Candidates, clearly in this country there's a problem with the number of mass shootings that we see. In Congress, what would you bring to the table that would be an idea to try to fix the problem that would be appealing to both people who believe the Second Amendment should not be infringed at all, and people who think there should be some sort of restrictions on the guns in this country?
And Jared Golden, you have the first minute.
I think what we need to do is make an investment in the current system that we have, the background check system we have. We need to make sure that there's enough money there to go ahead and implement that law, to prosecute people when they falsify when they submit a form for a background check. Sometimes what we find is that people don't get prosecuted when they're lying, trying to cheat a background check, get their hands on a firearm. That's one thing we can do. I also just want to go back and point out, We've already talked in the last debate about the NFIB. That is not a legit score right there. I worked for a small business all of my life. I just voted this year in the Maine legislature to lower the corporate tax rate for small businesses, create a deduction for small businesses, those are S corporations, for up to 20% of their pass-through income. Clearly, I do not have a 0% rating with small businesses. That's just a partisan organization that Bruce keeps talking about, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Tiffany Bond.
I'm the only candidate in this race that has taken the Moms Demand Action Gun Sense designation, and that is because I am open to having a conversation about weapons. I generally prefer the Second Amendment. I think it's a great right. It's something that I love, that my clients have the ability to hunt to provide for their families. They have the ability to protect themselves, and those are rights that we should keep. However, there are some times we should not have weapons available to people. I don't support legislation that comes for your guns, but if you shoot somebody else, if you are engaged in an act of domestic violence, you should not have guns. There are also some weapons that we should not have. And what I would love to see us do is come together and have a conversation with all the stakeholders, not just people who want restrictions, but also people who do use guns regularly, and have a real, productive, concrete conversation on what we should have access to as far as weapons, who should have access to it, and what we can do to make our current laws be more consistent.
Thank you. Bruce Colquitt.
There's nothing more important than making sure our kids are safe. I raised Sammy as a single dad from the time he was in diapers. He's now 28 and he's doing great. But there's nothing more important than keeping our kids safe. Now, the way not to do that is to repeal our Second Amendment rights. I have an A rating with the NRA, an A rating with the Gun Owners of Maine, and I've been endorsed by the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. This is the most rural, largest congressional district east of the Mississippi River. We grew up with firearms. It's the safest state in the union. Now, Jared mentioned something about the Second Amendment. Jared Golden has a D rating with the NRA, an F rating with the Gun Owners of Maine, and didn't even talk to the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. They probably wanted to ask him why he has a D rating and an F rating. That is not the way to protect our kids. We put money together as grants for our schools to make sure the schools are secure with resource officers or what have you. But I'll tell you another thing Jared mentioned about taxes. He has a history of raising taxes in the state legislature. He is the only political figure in Maine that's visible that supports a 3.8% tax on personal income, which Maine would be the highest tax state in the country.
Will Horton, we get your minute.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad Representative Poliquin brought up little kids, because I'm glad that your son is all right. But working in the school system, Tiffany and I have actually commiserated about this because her kids have sat through it. I, as an educator, have been in the classrooms with lockdown drills. School safety is of utmost importance. Schools should be the safest place for kids to go. It should be one place where they don't need to worry about anything. We need to create legislation. We need to stop talking, whether that means open ears, but something needs to be done. I think we should broaden our horizons, open up our ears to the young. They want to get involved in government. They have great ideas, better than see-through backpacks, but we also need to make it harder for people who shouldn't have guns to get guns.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move into our 45-second rebuttal. Jared?
Thank you very much. Look, I served in the United States Marine Corps Infantry. I fought in Afghanistan and Iraq. I know firearms. I got a D from the NRA, D for domestic violence, okay? Now, I'm strong on domestic violence. If Bruce wants to be weak on domestic violence, I think that's a problem. It's the #1 cause of homicide in the state, year in and year out. I know that's something Tiffany and I agree about. Sounds like it's something Will and I agree about. What we need to do is keep a limited number of bad actors from getting their hands on any firearms whatsoever, and beyond that, we don't want to infringe upon your Second Amendment rights. Lastly, my record is clear in the legislature. I have voted to middle-class tax cuts time and time again, taking your income tax from 7.9 to 7.1, doubling your property tax exemption. I have a record of fighting for the middle class when it comes to taxes, and I will continue to do that for you in Congress.
Thank you, Tiffany.
My children are why I want to have that conversation about weapons, and there's two reasons. There are very few things more terrifying on a regular school day than having a 5- and a 7-year-old come home and explain to you that they had a lockdown drill at school. That is a terrifying thing to talk about as a parent. That is a terrifying thing to watch your children describe to you, and we shouldn't be having those conversations. The other reason why I think that we should be having conversations about how we handle weapons is my children would probably have a grandfather today if we had sensible red flag laws that balanced your constitutional rights with your privacy and your ability to know when you can and cannot have a weapon. So I'd like to have a few more children, perhaps have grandparents.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
Yes, thank you. I'm the only person on this stage who has a proven history of standing up for our Second Amendment rights. This is very important in the state of Maine. Jared, you just mentioned this. I don't know how anybody with a D rating with the NRA and an F rating with the Gun Owners of Maine, and didn't even talk to the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, could ever even think about representing our second district here in Maine. Another thing that's really important, Jared is the only political figure in the state of Maine that's visible, that highly visible, I should say, that is supporting a 3.8% surtax on our income. That will take Maine's income tax rate to almost 11%, more than California, more than New York, and double the highest rate in Massachusetts. That's why he got a 100%, he votes 100% against small business in Maine.
Thank
It's
you very
horrible,
much.
it's not the
We
way
are
to go.
going to have Will Horace 45 seconds now.
Thank you. I don't think a high rating with the NRA ensures anyone's safety. Guns kill, but at the same time, they can be a good time. I enjoy going shooting with my father-in-law. I don't think anyone here or any politician that I know of is saying get rid of guns. But it seems politicians, especially during midterm election, are afraid to scare people. But this is a conversation that needs to happen, and actions need to be taken. I'm tired of hearing, my prayers are with those people who are suffering. It's too much, and it has to end, and we have to find a solution.
Thank you, Will Hoare. We are joined now by WABI TV's Emily Hadlock.
With so many businesses dependent on immigrants for workers in the 2nd Congressional District, including agriculture and hospitality, coupled with a growing workforce shortage, what will you do to support businesses and ensure they have the staff they need amid the changing immigration requirements?
And Emily's question goes first to candidate Tiffany Bond.
We need to have a real conversation about immigration and how we handle the low-wage jobs. I think everybody in Maine wants the higher-wage jobs, and if we're successful, that's terrific. That's really our goal. But the high-wage jobs are going to create more low-wage jobs that we don't have an interest in handling. We have an immigration system now that doesn't necessarily bring in the people that we want, the people who are willing to work and pay taxes and be a part of our community in a way that supports everyone. Let's actually tackle immigration at the root instead of the way that we have been handling it. Let's bring in people who want to be productive members of our society, and let's have those high-wage jobs come in to support everyone who's already here. That's the best thing that we can do for our economy.
Thank you, Bruce Pollock. When your minute.
Yes, thank you. We're a country of immigrants. I come from French-Canadian background, so we're immigrants from Canada. I'm very proud of that. We need to know who is in our country legally. That's critically important, and I've been very strong on border security to make sure we stop the flow of this deadly poison, heroin, that's coming into our country. 80% of it is coming in from the Mexican border, finding its way to rural Maine, including Aroostook County. We need to know who's in this country. We need to end the visa lottery. We need to make sure folks come into our country based on their merit and their skills and their ability to care for themselves, and we need to be secure on the borders. Now, when it comes to seasonal workers, to help our businesses along the coast and our agricultural workers in central Maine and mostly in Aroostook County, I'm all for it, and we've been working on to make sure we can have seasonal workers here, temporary workers, that don't take away from American jobs.
Thank you, Will Hoare. Your minute on this question.
Thanks. I think it's hard because up here in Maine and in rural America in general, you speak to a lot of people and they feel forgotten. They feel as though there's a huge amount of legislation being passed to help immigrants at the cost of people who have been here generations. I think first of all we have to look into helping to employ the people who live here in Maine already, which means, going back to my economy answer, we need to offer programs to help educate people, re-educate, and retrain for new careers. We need to bring the economy here. In addition, we are a nation of immigrants. We need to add to that, but not at the cost of losing the people who are already here. We need to focus on them.
Thank you. Jared Golden.
Thank you. We have a broken immigration system. Everybody knows that. Congress has not done what is necessary to fix it. Right now, what we have is a system that incentivizes illegal immigration. We have a system that encourages the import of cheaper labor, largely for business interests. My problem with that is simply that what I want is Americans to have the opportunities to have those jobs, and to do that, they need to be paid a higher wage. Too often, we have a system that drives down those wages by using visa programs like these. Now, there are areas where it is necessary. People talked about seasonal workers. I think about places like Bar Harbor, where it is necessary at times to bring in workers with these temporary worker visas. There are other times, though, when it gets abused by big corporations, and it hurts American workers and it depresses wages. We've seen that on our northern border, where we get companies that are bringing in Canadian loggers using these visa programs. That's not the intent of these programs to begin with, but unfortunately, it can hurt our economy here, even locally in Maine. We need to focus on higher wages, putting Americans to work first.
Right. Thank you. Tiffany Bond, you have 45 seconds of rebuttal.
Sure, I'd like to talk a little bit about the border wall. I think that's become a very popular thing for some people. Instead of spending millions of dollars on a border wall thousands of miles away, we should be using those same dollars to build our infrastructure and work on really bringing those high wage jobs here. Most of our border is secured, and I don't think anybody on this stage wants an insecure border. But that wall is not going to make a big diminution in the amount of drugs that are coming in, because they come in by boat, they come in by tunnel, they come in by plane, they come in ways that it will not stop. But that money can be used so much better to bring those high wage jobs here.
Bruce Pollock.
Yeah, I'm not picking on anyone here on the stage, but I just want to make sure everybody that's listening tonight understands what a clear difference there is between myself and these three candidates that are quite extreme in their views. Tiffany, you mentioned something about heroin. 80% of the heroin, 80% of it comes over the Mexican border. We need to secure our borders. And Jared, when we were just talking about immigration a moment ago, a couple things I wanted to mention that the people of Maine should know. First of all, Jared voted to give non-citizens welfare benefits ahead of Mainers on waiting lists. I'm always going to stand up for Maine first. Second of all, Jared voted against allowing police officers to report to immigration authorities folks that they found to be here illegally. That is not securing our borders. That's not protecting our families. When you're a member of Congress, you take an oath to support and defend our Constitution and our families.
We're going to have to stop you there and move on to Will Hoare for your 45 seconds.
Thank you. It is true that 80% of heroin is coming from across the Mexican border. It is also true that that is not the #1 killer right now of people in Maine in terms of drug overdose. It's fentanyl. And fentanyl comes from China. It comes from the mail. A border wall is not going to help that. We need to protect Mainers and do everything we can to protect them, but not at the extreme of losing fresh insight, fresh workers, and creativity to our economy. We need to remember that a wall is not going to stop people from coming up. Right now, the biggest drug is coming through the mail.
Great. Okay, and Jared Golden, the last 45 seconds on
Thank you. Well, you know, Bruce, I was hoping we were going to get through tonight without the lies and the dirty attacks, but unfortunately, that's just not going to happen, I can see. So I'll just go ahead and set my record straight. Now, the law that says that non-citizens, asylum seekers, can be in America is set by Congress. Bruce is the one that has done nothing about this in Congress. Now, the bill that he referred to, I voted for, actually put a 2-year cap that did not exist in law prior to my taking that vote. It put a 2-year cap on assistance to asylum seekers in Maine. That is putting a cap, again, on assistance to asylum seekers in Maine. That's something that Congress has not taken action on. Bruce has punted this issue to people in the Maine state legislature. When I'm in Congress, I'm going to focus on immigration reform because that's what we need to do.
We'll have to leave it there on that question, Kelly.
Yes, thank you very much. There's still plenty more of this debate to go, but we will be back in just a few minutes with more. me to switch my microphone cord? Is that what y'all were telling me?
Welcome back. You're watching WAGN, WABI, and WMTW's coverage of the 2nd District Congressional Debate, and we're joined now by Paul Merrill from WMTW, who will ask Bruce Poliquin our next question.
Congressmen and other candidates, the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land, although clearly a lot of people would make the argument that health care is anything but affordable under a lot of circumstances. In Congress, what could you do to make sure people have access to affordable health care?
Everybody in this country needs to have health care, and everybody needs to be able to afford health insurance in order to get that care. One of the first votes I cast in Congress in 2015 was, and I was one of only 3 Republicans in Congress to vote against repealing the Affordable Care Act because there was no replacement. And let me tell you, I got some criticized about that, but it was the right thing to do. Now, since that time, I've introduced a 14-point plan, in part based on the Maine model that drove down the cost of health insurance and gave us more choices. It was called PL 90. My mother is a nurse. She's 90 years old now, doesn't practice, of course, but she's a nurse. I grew up with health care in our family. My son has a pre-existing condition. Everything I've ever supported is to drive down the cost of health insurance, make sure everybody is protected when they have a pre-existing condition. But I'll tell you what I don't think is a good idea is a 100% government-run health care that Jared Golden supports that'll drive up taxes, cost $32 trillion, and end Medicare as we know it.
Thank you. We'll move to Will Hoare now for this question.
Thank you. I think, first of all, we need to have a Congress that's willing to work together and talk together to find a solution. We have the right, who's trying to repeal something put in place by the left with no other replacement in plan, with no replacement in sight. We can't move forward until there is a replacement or until there is a plan that is actually going to help the American people. You know, it's funny, in the last debate, I said that health care was a right. And one of the responses in the live feed when I went back was that was not in the Bill of Rights. Very true. There was no health care in the Bill of Rights. There was no health care in the world at that point. But times have changed. The world has changed. And as the #1 most powerful country in the world, I think it is incumbent on us to provide affordable health care to every American.
Jared Golden.
Thank you. My plan is simple. I think we need to move forward with Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act, as voters here in Maine in the 2nd District voted to approve in November of 2017. And beyond that, I think that we need to lower the age for eligibility to Medicare to 55, allow people to buy in, to opt in into Medicare if they're not getting an affordable option through the workplace or in the marketplace on their own. Beyond that, I want Congress to be able to empower Medicare and Medicaid to negotiate for lower drug prices. These are some of the things we can do in the short term to get a handle on our very expensive healthcare system. And I'll just go ahead and leave it there for now.
All right, Tiffany Bond, your minute on this question.
We have a large gap in opinions of how we handle healthcare, and I think that what we can all agree on is we all want healthcare that we can afford and we can afford to use. Right now, I'm like a lot of you that own small businesses. I have healthcare that I can't afford to purchase every month and that I certainly can't afford to use. I haven't been to the doctor since my 5-year-old was born because it just wasn't financially viable. Every time a bill came, it was too much. And so when a doctor's visit is the same as your monthly premiums, and your monthly premiums are $1,500 a month, that's not a solution. We need to be taking the law as we have it now, and every time we touch it, make it better. Now, Bruce voted for H.R. 1628. Wasn't a great bill. It was the Republican version of how to handle the ACA. It was the AHCA. And I was waiting for that bill. I was waiting for it to be better, and it wasn't. So let's let people who want to have a government-sponsored health care buy into it by allowing them to buy into Medicaid.
Thank you, Tiffany Bond. We will go back for a 45-second rebuttal, beginning with Bruce Pollock.
Yeah, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up with health care in our family. My mom's a nurse. We took care of people in our family, and my son has a pre-existing condition. I'll tell you what I really object to is all of this out-of-state money by Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters and all these dark money groups that are pouring money in here, trying to convince the people of Maine and attack me and say I'm something and I'm not. It's completely false. I always support folks with pre-existing conditions. I've always voted that way. But I'll tell you one thing, when it comes to access to health care, I believe that it's a good idea to allow people to buy experimental drugs if they are terminally ill. Jared Golden voted against allowing terminally ill individuals to buy experimental drugs. That is a lack of access to health care. That's a really bad idea.
That's time on that one. We'll bring it back to Will Hoare, 45.
At the end of the day, you know, our current representative voted against the health care. Even if he came up with another plan, he voted against the health care plan. That's part of what motivated me to run. My wife has a chronic illness. Before the ACA, just her insurance alone cost $70,000. Now, some of you might complain that you are healthy and you're paying for her health care, and that, in the current scenario, could be a valid complaint, and we need to work on that. But the fact that my wife had $70,000 in healthcare costs just for the insurance, not for any treatment, is crazy. The ACA dropped it to 17, which is still too much, but it's better. We need to work harder. We need to find solutions.
Thank you on that. Jared Golden, you're 45.
Thank you, folks. Bruce just talked about a 14-point plan. Problem is, it was never up for a vote. What did come up for a vote was a repeal bill of the Affordable Care Act. That's a bill that AARP said would allow people over the age of 50 to be charged up to 5 times more for their health care. They called it an age tax. The Maine Hospital Association opposed the bill. The Maine Medical Association opposed the bill. Susan Collins, voting against the Republican effort to repeal the ACA, said it would affect our rural hospitals and nursing homes to the point that they would have a difficult time even staying in existence. That it would have a terrible impact on the most vulnerable in our society. Among them, our seniors. In the AARP said that it would have allowed discrimination against people who already have health conditions like cancer and diabetes. That is pre-existing conditions.
Right. Tiffany Bond.
I'm going to use my 45 seconds not to talk about the ACA, but to talk about the ADA. While we're talking about voting records, Representative Poliquin voted for H.R. 620. That's the ADA Educational Reform Act of 2017. It updated law from 1990 and put the entire burden of notifying businesses that were not in compliance on the disabled. What kind of society are we moving into when we place the burden on the most vulnerable? And it was a tricky little bill, too. If you want to see my breakdown of that bill, please go to my Twitter account. If you go to Moments, it'll have a bill read line by line of what's wrong with it, and I'm at Tiffany Bond.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on with our very next question, and Emily Tadlock from WABI is here to ask it.
We hear all of the talk about people wanting to help and supporting in the fight against the opioid epidemic, but what actions, more than those that have already been taken in Washington, can actually be taken now to stem the drug crisis that is claiming so many lives right here in our state?
Okay, and the first 1 minute will go to Will Hoare.
Thanks. I may need more than a minute. This is very personal to me. I'm 11 years sober, celebrated on September 17th. We have to create a multi-tiered approach. First, address the current opioid addicts. We need to decriminalize substance use disorder. It seems that right now the government is trying to bring us back to the 80s. That's not going to work. Just say no didn't work. These are people who are sick. They need treatment. We need to repeal the mandatory minimum sentencing laws, which will also help the economy, but you're not helping people who are addicted by imprisoning them. We need to create mandates that encourage treatment and drug court before resorting to incarceration. Just as a side note, that would free up $2.2 billion in costs for incarcerating prisoners, and it would free up $7.7 billion.
Thank you. We do have,
Oh, sorry,
we will have
sorry,
another
sorry.
45
Yeah, yeah.
seconds, but we're going to go to Jared Golden now.
Thank you. You know, we've actually seen a lot of mailers come into the district by outside groups saying that Congress has solved this problem of the opiate crisis. We know that's not true in Maine, sadly. We are still one of a handful of states that continue to see a rise in opiate overdose deaths. All the experts that have spoken to me about this issue in my time in the Maine State Legislature have told me that the single most important thing we can do is expand access to affordable health coverage. Medicaid expansion that Maine voters approved in November of 2017 is one of those. That's something I fought for in the Maine State Legislature. We need to continue to try and get that coverage to people who are struggling with addiction so they can get the treatment they need. That's the first step. We got to stop the crisis today, and then we can start looking into prevention and holding drug companies accountable who are partly responsible for getting us into this crisis to begin with.
Okay, moving on to Tiffany Bond.
Congress has three basic mechanisms to function. There's a carrot, which is either tax deductions or money sent to states. There's a stick, which is going and putting in tax penalties, and then there's outright prohibition. So there's a lot of limits on what Congress can really do to help with opioids. A lot of that's going to be a state-level answer, but what they can do is they can provide that carrot. There can be some funding that comes to the state of Maine. We are a net recipient of tax dollars, and we need help in that area. We can also retool the ACA to make sure that there is options to expand coverage. That's about the limit of what you're going to be able to expect from Congress realistically. What you should make sure you do is when you vote for governor, be careful and pick somebody who really helps.
Okay, Bruce Pelican.
Thank you. I have one brother, Jim, who's no longer with us. He was a great guy with a big heart and a great musician. He struggled with substance abuse for 35 years and as a result is no longer with us. I understand this issue well. This has got to be all hands on deck. For those folks that are listening, if you have a problem with addiction, or you know a loved one or a neighbor or a family member who has a problem with addiction, you've got to speak up. I know it's embarrassing. Don't be ashamed, because the first step to healing is speaking up, and you can get help. We've appropriated an additional $4 billion from Washington to go to the states to make sure that we have enough detox facilities. We do better on post-detox recovery. We have opportunities to have safe housings such that these folks get away from the bad actors. And employment is critically important to wrap ourselves around the folks we love to make sure they can fight this scourge. We also need to secure our borders, where 80% of the heroin is coming from. That's a substitute for the expensive opioid pills.
Thank you. Will Hoare, your 45 seconds.
Thank you. So again, I feel like I was cut off, but we need to make sure that people can get treatment. Right now, only 1 in 3 Mainers who wanted to get treatment were able to get treatment. That left 23,000 Mainers out in the cold. Also, we need to educate our healthcare providers. 3 out of 4 opioid addicts start with prescription medication, yet doctors aren't taught how to deal with musculoskeletal injuries. 20% of all injuries, 20% of why you go to the doctor is because of pain to the back. Uneducated doctors, they rely on prescription medication as opposed to proper treatment, and we need to address them as well. Healthcare is part of the solution.
Okay, Jared Golden, your 45.
Thank you. Again, we need to make sure people have access to health care. We need to expand Medicaid. We need to do that for those 80,000 people in Maine. Unfortunately, the bill that the congressman voted for would have taken access to Medicaid away from tens of thousands of Mainers. Now, Bruce has talked about the issue of immigration and tied it into this. When I worked for the Homeland Security Committee staff, I actually worked on a grant program called Operation Stone Garden, which worked to encourage local law enforcement to work with federal authorities like Customs and Border Patrol and ICE to help secure our borders, do drug interdiction. We use that right here in Maine. And so I just wanted to get back to that issue because Bruce falsely claimed that I somehow don't want local law enforcement to work with federal authorities. Completely not true. I used to drive policy on this issue when I worked for Senator Susan Collins.
Okay, Tiffany Bond.
There's a lot of great solutions on the stage, so I don't want to rehash those. What I do want to do is talk about the amount of resources that go into our congressional races. Today, the Sun Journal published that there's already $15 million in this race. If we were all not taking campaign contributions and instead focusing those back on the community, what could $15 million do towards opioids in rural Maine? And you should be asking yourself those questions. What amount of energy is put in to raise $15 million for an election? And how can people who are raising that amount of money actually be doing the job you've hired them for?
Okay, Bruce Poliquin.
Yeah, there's no wonder there is millions and millions of dollars pouring into this race from Nancy Pelosi, the extreme radical from San Francisco, Maxine Waters, all this dark money, and it's coming in to attack me and to prop up Jared Golden. And here's the reason. Jared Golden votes in line with Nancy Pelosi. She must have looked at his voting record and said, this is exactly the sort of person we want down in Washington. He votes against our Second Amendment rights. He has a D rating with the NRA, an F rating with the gun owners of Maine. Nancy Pelosi loves that. He wants a 100% government takeover of health care. Very risky, very radical. It'll end private insurance you have with your employer. That's gone. It'll end Medicare as we know it. And he loves the fact that you can use, he voted rather to use welfare dollars to buy alcohol, tobacco, and lottery tickets. Very extreme.
And for that, we will pivot to Katie Zerilli from WAGM.
All right, we now have a question from one of our viewers. This is Cindy Condon from Ashland.
She seems very nice.
She's great. All right, she's wondering, she says, I was wondering what they might do about the cost of tuition that keeps rising for college students. It's really difficult when they come out of college and they have such high debt.
And Tiffany Bond, you'll have the first crack at this one.
I probably have the most student loan debt of anybody up here. 3 degrees wasn't enough, so I doubled down and got a 4th. We need to be offering a range of flexible options for students, whether it's community college, which is where I started out, all the way up to trade schools and apprenticeship programs, and I think that will help mitigate it. We also need to be pushing federal funding back through to our colleges. If we do not have an educated workforce, we're going to fall behind globally, and that is something that Maine cannot afford to do. So I would love to see us be working towards some of those carrots and pushing some of those carrots towards our educational system, towards flexible options, towards retooling what helps make us a better Maine.
All right, Bruce Poliquin.
Yes. I had student loans like many people did, but when I got out of school, I was able to get a good job. I worked really hard for my education. I scrubbed toilets, painted metal roofs, dug sewer lines. I'm very proud of the education I got, and that was a really key thing for me. But when I took out student loans, what scholarships wouldn't pay and what my summer earnings wouldn't pay, I was very careful not to take on too much debt. But I had a good job so I could pay back my student loans over a period of time. That's why it is so critically important to make sure we continue to go in this direction with our economy. It's getting better. People are making more money. There are more opportunities. More and more of our kids are able to come back to Maine because they can find good employment. You do that with less red tape, lower taxes, fair trade. Jared Golden has a voting record that Nancy Pelosi loves. Higher taxes, more red tape, less economic growth, and fewer jobs. We need to go forward, not backward. Forward with a stronger economy for these kids so they can get out of college and have a good future.
Thank you. Will Hoare.
Thank you. I, too, have student loans, and I am paying them off and will be for a long time. I think we need to, A, make sure the federal government has oversight over these companies that are making loans and keep them from taking predatory action on students who just graduated. They are some of the weakest people economically in this country. Second of all, I think it's necessary for the federal government to come up with solutions to help mitigate the cost. We have ROTC for public education, there's loan forgiveness. I think we need to expand that to fields in nursing, to other areas where we need help, especially in the Maine economy and other rural American counties and districts. We need to encourage people to come work in these places, and the federal government can help do that by creating programs for loan forgiveness.
Jerry Golden.
Thank you. I think that Congress needs to stop cutting funding to universities and to states, which causes states to also pull back on their support of our university system, which in return causes universities to raise tuition rates, which is piling on to people's debt problem. Now, another solution that I have and I like to talk about is service opportunities. I served this country for 4 years in the Marines. In return, my college got paid for. I want a universal service opportunity for our youth. You give this country 2 years in the military or in our communities, in maybe a hospital, maybe teaching, and then we can pay for your college in return. You got to give something and get something in return. Now, Bruce seems to have some strange obsession with Nancy Pelosi, as you can see tonight. I, on the other hand, do not. I made very clear well over a year ago that I will not be supporting her because I don't support her agenda. He can keep talking about that. But what matters is that right here in Bangor, Maine, in the 2nd District, his boss, Speaker Paul Ryan, has a super PAC office running a dirty campaign against me, against Tiffany, and Will. They're propping up Bruce Poliquin.
All right. 45-second rebuttal period begins with Tiffany Vaughn.
Sometimes I wonder if Bruce has been to rural Maine lately, because it's not getting better. I work in family law, and so I am in all of your financials. And let me tell you, I have cases in Rumford, in Skowhegan, in Newport, in Millinocket, in Belfast, in Lewiston, in Bangor. I am in a lot of the district courts on a regular basis in District 2, and it's not getting better. It is very difficult for families making an average of $40,000 a year to separate, and we need to be providing better supports to this district.
Bruce Poliquin.
Yes, I think Jared Golden, and I'm not criticizing him as an individual or anybody else, but his policies are so extreme and so radical. For him to look in the camera and tell the people of Maine that Nancy Pelosi has spent about $7 million lying and attacking me and propping him up is something that just happened by accident. She loves Jared Golden's voting record. 100% government takeover of healthcare, and all the private healthcare plans, they're just gone, they're canceled, and you get pushed into a government-run program with no choice. Second Amendment that he doesn't support and has a D rating with, and he votes against small businesses all the time and wants Maine to become the highest tax state in the country. That's why Nancy Pelosi supports Jared Golden, and that's the truth, and he should tell it.
All right, Will Hoare, your rebuttal.
I think we just need to take a moment before we're winding down, and we made it pretty far, but I don't want this to turn into a name-calling session. We shouldn't be talking about Nancy Pelosi. We were asked about trying to create programs for getting rid of debt. We need to stick to that. This character debate is not helping anybody. Back to the programs of teaching and how to mitigate that. I agree, we need service positions and we need better paying jobs. I'm making $17,000 a year and I'm supposed to be paying student debts. That's not a livable wage to begin with. We need help.
And the last word will be Jared Golden's.
Thank you, Will. Folks back home, I hope that you're tired of hearing your congressman issue nothing but attack after attack, false attack after false attack, without ever putting forward real solutions to issues of great importance to the people of Maine. Student debt, health care, which he voted to take away from 117,000 people. Now, I sadly do not like being engaged in this debate of character attacks like Will and Tiffany as well. I'm standing here right in between them. I want to talk about the issues. I've been very clear. I'm not going to support Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. I've said it again and again. I don't support her agenda. Paul Ryan supports Bruce's, and he's operating here in the district. So I think that Bruce should be clear and try and explain to the people of Maine why is there a super PAC operating in this district instead of talking about Nancy Pelosi.
All right, thank you very much. Kelly.
All right, well, we are going to actually switch gears just a little bit, and we're going to move on to the yes or no questions that we have for you for this evening.
To save time, Kelly and I will be asking these, and we'll start with Bruce Poliquin first on this question. Would you support a ban on bump stocks?
we need to enforce the laws we have on the books now, and that's the best way to protect our Second Amendment rights. Support the laws on the books now, and I've always done that.
Will Hoare? Yes or no?
Yes.
Even the NRA said that we should ban bump stocks.
Tiffany?
Probably, but it needs to be well drafted.
Okay. Who did you vote for in 2016?
Is this my turn?
Is it?
Yes,
Yes.
Bruce Ball.
You mean the presidential election? In this election for Congress, I voted for myself and only for myself. I'm going to do it again in 3 weeks. For the presidential, that's my business. I work with everybody, Republicans and Democrats, as a business professional, but I do not tell anybody who I vote for.
Will Hoare?
I didn't really love any of the options, but I ended up voting for Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
Same thing. I wish I had other options. I voted for Hillary Clinton.
I wrote in my own ticket.
Bruce Poliquin, who is your number 2 choice in this race?
I don't think anyone else has the qualifications that I do. I'm the only one who has had 35 years, a lifetime of professional lifetime of creating jobs. Nobody else here has that experience. I
Number
also
two.
stand up for our Second Amendment
Number
rights.
2 for Will?
And so
It's going to be eeny, meeny, miny, mo between these two next to me.
Jerry?
Jared Golden?
I'll vote for Will and Tiffany in no particular order. I'll keep that one to myself. They're both
Tiffany?
nice people.
I'm going to also say between Jared and Will would be the best choice. I'm surprised Bruce doesn't want me as his second choice
All right.
since I'm not Jared.
Finally, we're just going to ask this one real quick, and this is just a yes or no for sure. With the new ranked choice voting method, will you accept the outcome of this race, Bruce?
I'm going to circle in Bruce Poliquin, one and only vote, drop it in the box, and go forward.
Okay. Will?
Yes, 100%.
I don't think you answered the question, but yes, absolutely.
Yes, and you'd be foolish not to rank because you might end up with the other guy.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now going to give each candidate a moment to do their final 1-minute conclusion.
These will be 1-minute statements, and we'll begin with Will Hoare.
Okay. In a 12-step program that I'm in, we have a definition of insanity, which is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. This election process, I've been part of it from the voting standpoint, and I've only had 2 options. As you just heard, I didn't really like my choices. That's part of why I'm here. If you want to stick with the status quo and vote either left or right, you're welcome to. If you want something new, something different, and someone who's looking out for the interests of Mainers, you there sitting on your couch, I'm the one for you, and I will fight for you tirelessly to do the right thing and to get the economy going, the opioid crisis in check, get teachers paid, and work on our schools here in Maine and throughout rural America. Rural America deserves respect. Maine matters. We matter. Let's get someone in Washington who's going to bring business back.
Thank you. Jared Golden.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone back home. I also want to thank my wife back home, Isabel. Thank you. I love you very much. I know you're watching. So, when I was in the Marines, we had a very simple rule about leadership. Leaders put the people they lead first before they stop to think about themselves. We practiced this when it was mealtime. Privates were first in line to eat. Then came private first class, Lance Corporal, right on up through the ranks to the highest ranking officer that was present. Now, this is critically important, I think, in the context of who you should choose to represent you in Congress. I understand what real leadership is. That's why I'm going to put you first. I'm going to put the middle class first. I'm going to fight for working middle class people, for higher wages. I'm going to fight to protect Medicare, protect Social Security, and protect people's health care coverage to make sure that you have access to affordable coverage. It's the #1 issue in Maine and in America in 2018 because of what Congress tried to do to our health care in 2017. Thank you very much.
All right, Tiffany Bond.
I'd like to talk to you about ranked choice voting. It gives us the freedom to try something new, like Will said. And that's important. If you are so tired of having to pick between the lesser of 2 evils, if you are so tired of knowing that no matter what your vote is, 30 to 40% of the country is going to feel like they're living under an oppressive regime, we can do something different. You can choose somebody who says, I am not going to take money. I am not going to be beholden to anybody but you. In fact, I will demonstrate that I can do the job. I demonstrate it on a regular basis online. You can go online and see that I will read bills for you line by line and explain what they mean. I will turn nonsense into common sense, and to help you really get this done properly. We have $15 million already in this race. How many hours would you need to work to earn $15 million? And could you possibly do this job while doing that?
All right, 1 minute, Bruce Pollock.
Thank you. The voters in the 2nd District of Maine have a real choice this year. I am the only individual on this stage that has experience creating jobs in the real world economy, running small businesses and creating jobs. None of the other folks do. Second of all, I help put in place the building blocks such that our economy goes forward and is strong. Lower taxes, fair trade, and less regulation. Whereas my opponents want to raise taxes that'll kill our economy. I also support our Second Amendment rights. Jared Golden, one of my opponents here, has a D rating with the NRA, an F rating with the Gun Owners of Maine. I have A ratings and am endorsed by these organizations. I also am so proud of my work on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I work so hard with Senator Collins to make sure that our veterans can get health care closer to home. And that's done by the local hospitals providing these services. Then they've got to get paid. That helps keep our hospitals open, our small hospitals open, and helps everybody else in the community. My name is Bruce Poliquin. First column, fill in the thing, put it in the bucket, and I appreciate working for you going forward.
All right, well, I think there's plenty for voters to think about this year.
Absolutely. Thank you for the spirited debate.
Yes. And that actually concludes our 2nd congressional debate. So we thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you especially to our candidates and our panelists.
That's right, and we appreciate you guys traveling up here. We also thank our partners, WMTW, WABI, and the Aroostook Partnership for joining us for this debate. And again, thank you to everybody for participating. We think there's a lot for people to think about, and we hope you'll get out there and vote this coming November. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Thanks, Tiffany. Good to see you.